Welcome back to Reimagining Cyber, where we break down the threats that matter and what you can actually do about them. And today's episode is all about the mass exploitation of Microsoft SharePoint, and it's centered around a critical vulnerability, CVEs. It's been making headlines after CISA dropped a major alert on July 20th. And here to walk us through the details, we've got Tyler Moffitt, Senior Security Analyst at OpenText Cybersecurity. Tyler, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Good to be back.
Okay, let's kick off then. What exactly is this vulnerability in SharePoint, and why is it such a big deal?
There's a whole bunch of CVEs, but basically CVE 2025, there's 49704, 49706, 2371. There's a whole bunch, but basically it's remote code execution flaw in the Microsoft SharePoint server. Okay, and it's super bad, all right, because everybody's using SharePoint. Everybody has it. I mean, you're using Windows. It's got a CVSS score of a 9.8, and this is a scale of 10, and I've really never seen 10. So 9.8 is basically just as bad as it gets. But, so why is it so dangerous? How easily it can be weaponized. So attackers basically don't need credentials. All they need to do is trick the server into processing, a specifically crafted request, and then bang, they're in, right? And they can run arbitrary code, move laterally, escalate privileges, gain documents. I mean, basically do everything you want to do before you would deploy ransomware payloads. Credential stealers, full backdoor access, whatever they would want. And that's essentially how we're seeing it leveraged through ransomware.
None of this is good news, but why is it blowing up now?
This is a story as old as time. Microsoft already patched this, I believe, back in May, but basically tons of organizations still haven't applied this patch. That delay gave ransomware groups sort of an opening, and CISA confirmed active exploitation that's happening right now. And attackers are going after public-facing SharePoint instances that weren't patched. And so we're already seeing it basically folded into ransomware as a service toolkits because it's already being leveraged by ransomware. I mean, it's really big. It's crimes of opportunity, especially with these, criminal ransomware gangs. So they're hot on the trigger, ready to go after this as quickly as possible. And some of the ones we've seen are like Chaos, which is ransomware as a service, and Nilo Locker, both been recently active. But honestly, every single ransomware as a service out there, you betcha, is going to be using these, because we've already seen success with like Akira ransomware, using a whole bunch for like Cisco adaptive security appliances and Sonic Wall firewalls, things like that. I mean, that's been a bread and butter staple, if you will, going after vulnerabilities that aren't patched. And this is like a big, massive one that has just been dropped right at their feet.
Okay, the attackers then, once they get in through the SharePoint floor, what does the actual kill chain look like?
So it varies, but basically the initial access, like going right through the back door that's open through SharePoint. And then from there, command and control beaconing, they deploy the remote access tools and PowerShell payloads, which allow lateral movement. Lateral movement is basically where they're propagating to as many machines as possible, getting as much permissions as they possibly can, and essentially casing the joint. Right? They want to find out who they've hit, because they don't know who they've hit when they're just going after anything that's vulnerable. So they have to find out, do I hit, a doctor's office or a dentist or, manufacturing plant? They don't know, but they find out once they move laterally and start like looking at documents. And they look at everything, especially finance documents, right? As they look at a balance sheet, they know how much money you have in the bank. So you can't play games with them once ransomware comes. And, they already know how much money you have. So when they ask for that much and you go, I don't have that much money, that's not going to go over very well when they've literally seen it on your balance sheet. But yeah, that's basically it. Casing the joint, data exfiltration right before the payload, which is usually ransomware, right? We've also seen some info stealing malware, but for the most part, the return on investment, all this work, is up to lead to ransomware.
And how widespread is the exposure here? Is it just the big enterprises, or are we looking at SMBs as well?
It's everybody. Literally any org running like on-premise SharePoint server, especially like SharePoint Server 2019 or 2016, massive risk. Even if you're hybrid and you think you're air-gapped, attackers are smart. A lot of, especially the smaller size businesses, they often skip patches thinking we're too small, but literally like those are the easiest targets. And we have tons of data to support this from even our own like OpenText, threat reports that we give out showing that SMBs are usually the bread and butter because of the amount of time it takes to breach them and get in and get out and put the ransomware out, like it's a good return on investment. So, but like even small government entities and mid-sized businesses are, hitting the last 2 weeks alone. So, if organizations, still haven't applied it, this is huge, like backdoor access for ransomware groups that have an opening. And CISA has even confirmed active exploitation is happening right now. And so they're going after public-facing SharePoint instances that aren't patched. And so, they're even folding it into ransomware as a service, toolkits.
Let's look at the practical stuff now. I'm listening to this. My org runs SharePoint. What should I be doing today?
Well, the elephant in the room. I'm sure everybody knows I'm going to say this. Patch immediately. All right. This is July Patch Tuesday notes. This is, just implemented. So it really didn't have that long of a delta, if that makes sense, from when Microsoft related as a patch to when people, need to patch. But this is something you need to be on top of right now, right? CISA linked the exact KBs in their July 20 advisory. But so what do you do if you're suspecting, hey, look, I've patched, great, but what about that time in between? Was anything done? So audit your access logs, look for suspicious post requests, odd PowerShell activity, if possible, move SharePoint behind, VPN or access proxy. And then so also check for indicators of compromise. And there's definitely some out there. Those all linked on the CISA, but there are some malicious files like the sp install 0.aspx. There's some hashes there. There's also some malicious IPs. There's at least 3 malicious IPs that they usually beacon to or communicate to after they've, got a foothold on one machine. You could obviously make sure those are, blacklisted in your organization, or the security you have is monitoring and is aware of those, right? That's huge. Back up your content database. If ransomware hits, the content database is their top target. Rotating cryptographic keys, even if you've patched, that's pretty big. Enable logging. Many orgs don't have audit logging turned on for SharePoint. It's free, and in this case, very valuable. So definitely do that.
So apart from issuing these advisories, have Microsoft, CISA, or anyone else for that matter done anything else?
So Microsoft quietly released mitigation guidance for older versions, and basically confirmed that attackers are bypassing weak configuration. So CISA went a step further by adding this to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, which means all federal agencies must patch by August 5th. And I mean, that's pretty big to basically say that everybody we know and we're in control of and is monitored by us has to be patched by August 5th. I don't know of, how often. I mean, that seems pretty rare and pretty big, right? They're clearly treating this as like a national security issue, especially after the EU healthcare breaches last week. So, which may or may not have been tied to SharePoint as a vector. We don't know. You can only speculate at this point. But that's pretty big, to put like a deadline. You've got to patch for this. I mean, it's honestly, it's reminiscent. The hype of the WannaCry. Granted, we haven't seen the damage yet for that, but that was unpatched, server message block, and this could be really damaging. So just patch it, please.
Wrapping up then now, do you think, Tyler, that we're looking at the start of another wave of application layer attacks?
100%. I mean, this shows that attackers are pivoting, always pivoting, taking advantage of crisis, vulnerability chaining, right? And abusing trusted apps, right? It defeats sort of whatever security you got going on if one of your trusted applications has a backdoor waiting in it, right? And if you're not patching it and they've got a way to just waltz right in, why wouldn't they use it? And so if they have these sort of gems that are for them to just find, that are placed at their feet, and they don't have long, there's a time to live on this. Most people are patching right now, or have already patched, and if you're listening now and you haven't patched, please patch. But this isn't a long time from when it was disclosed, just barely a week ago, and then everybody was like, oh my God, I have to patch. But within that time, they've already had successful people leveraging ransomware through these, exploits, and exploits are always going to be a big part of the thing. And it's just showing you how big exploits can be, right? the more orgs rely on like internal portals, the juicier they become for, the initial access points. So I do expect more of these, especially around like unpatched enterprise tools. And so just keep your eye on the ransomware gangs that like to leverage these. They've been, unusually active this month.
So SS score was 9.8. Would you describe your level of worry as 9.8?
Yeah, no, that seems pretty hot, right on the money. Out of 10, like I can't remember the last 10. Maybe WannaCry was, but this is a 9.8 out of 10, and I would completely agree with it. It's literally a backdoor if you're using SharePoint and you haven't done the Microsoft's July patches. So just do it. Like and then from there, look for indicators of compromise within that time. If you have like a weak gap or whatever, then look for logs to see any of those indicators of compromise.
Tyler, it's always good to, finish a show on a light, fluffy, positive moment just like that. Fantastic. Insightful as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on. Please patch everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll drop the CISA advisory in the episode description. This has been Reimagining Cyber. Thanks so much for listening. Do remember to subscribe and follow the show. And also, why don't you give us, a very high rating? If you could, 9.8 would be wonderful. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
I love it.